today, our major story for today will be looking at indigenous language as the world celebrates International Mother Day today globally. We want to look at the essence and how to preserve indigenous languages. Joining us in the studio is our in-house analyst. We have Jide Taiwo with us this morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Blessing.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me back. Glad to be back with you.
It's a pleasure having the tallest man in the building.
I try. Just a little
The tallest man in the tallest building.
Just by a little bit. How's it going?
All right, interesting. Today it's globally it's been celebrated as International Mother Language Day, a day dedicated to promote indigenous languages. How will you assess the disposition to the use of indigenous languages globally? Then let's look at Africa, by extension, Nigeria.
So globally, I think the world has sort of adopted a certain people's mother tongue. You know, English is the most widely spoken language across the globe, and you can't remove that from the world power, say the UK, where the language emanated from, like the US, like the dominant world power now, places like Australia. So you go to almost everywhere in the world, even if people are not fluent speakers of the language, they can pick out one or two, you know, they can respond and have conversations. So that's like the current state. We've sort of toed the line of the biggest world power, and the language of communication there is English language. So that's what it is. However, there are certain other languages that have been ratified by the United Nations, you know, Portuguese, German, Spanish, I think it's about 7 of them or thereabouts, that are treated almost as importantly as everyone treats English. That's why you have a Putin, for instance, have like a 2-hour conversation with Tucker Carlson. And even though I think Putin understands English, he was speaking in Russian. It's almost the same thing for the French Prime Minister or the German Chancellor, for instance. So when they speak, because their languages have been ratified, now if you look at it, how many countries in the world actually speak German? So you see Germany itself, Austria, maybe parts of Switzerland, but it's a world power, right? You see how many countries speak Portuguese, you know, outside of Europe. It's only Portugal that speaks it in Europe. We adopted it in like a couple of countries in Africa, and then say Brazil and a number of other places. So we've had this world power sort of divvy up the communication, the language of the world to sort of be central around them. Now, the rest of us in Africa now, we cannot, you know, it's where we found ourselves after the great, you know, robbery of Africa, where the world powers divided the entire continent into different languages. And so that's the vestiges that we still see. Incidentally, Nigeria is surrounded by French-speaking countries, right? You know, there's Benin, there's Niger Republic, there's Cameroon. Across, after Benin is Togo, before we get to the next Anglophone country, which is Ghana. You know, so we've kind of, I mean, it's not by design, but those are the consequences of colonialism and the vestiges of what we still see today. By and large, I think there's, in the last decade or thereabout, it appears that there's a sort of renaissance of African languages, the mother tongue, in different places across Africa. I know that certain governors in Nigeria have tried to moot, you know, the move for the adoption of local languages, either in schools or in public spaces. I think that's a bright idea. I don't know how it's going to be enforced or executed. Take a place like Lagos, for instance. Yes, Lagos belongs to a certain section of the country. However, Lagos is a cosmopolitan city. Chances are that 3 out of every 10 Lagosians that you see is not a native speaker of the Yoruba language. So how do you now enforce it? How do you make it a thing? Those are some of the challenges that I assume that we'll see.
All right, looking at the challenges, because English, like you said, is the most widely spoken language in the world, because they colonized more countries and spread their influence. So the English language in countries like Nigeria and some other African countries where they colonized have been used to pass on knowledge. It's been used in schools. Now, even when some African leaders or Nigerian governors want to strengthen the mother language, there are still issues. One of them, for schools, for instance, the books which they will be reading, or the textbooks, who's going to translate them to the different mother languages? You understand that in Nigeria, we have at least 200 languages. So let's begin from there. Translation of the books. Can we commit, or can Nigeria commit resources into that? Is it possible to do that?
So that's why I think it's a nice sentiment, it's inspirational, but I don't see how it's going to be done. We have over 200 mutually unintelligible languages in Nigeria alone. So that means when you speak your mother tongue, I can understand it. Chances are that we went to school together, right? So are we going to have separate textbooks for different categories? It's just a lot of muddied up that I don't see how it's done. What we can encourage, what I think is even more feasible, is getting people use their mother languages in informal settings. For instance, at the home, folks are encouraged to speak their local languages. I know I've had nieces and nephews that have relocated, and I know that teachers in those European schools that they go to have told their parents, you know what, leave English to us. That's the language of communication anyway. However, in your homes, endeavor to use your local languages. That's why I think Spanish, which is like the biggest language in Latin America, is the second most widely spoken language in the US, right? So even though those countries have lost whatever it is with their own indigenous languages, but that lingua franca that they've chosen, Spanish, is widely spoken among the Latin community in the US, such that, it's almost like for every English text or communication by the US government, there's a Spanish translation. That's the way I feel like it can be done here. So you find out that if you live in Lagos or Abuja, for example, yes, you can have the official communication done in English language, but there's need for it to be translated into, various indigenous tongues. I don't see it translating into the school setting. I'm sorry, I don't see it.
All right. Talking about the school setting, you will observe that over the years, there's always been this advocacy for the use of indigenous languages, but it's been a challenge because there are people who believe that the use of indigenous language could make you cause a form of limitation when it comes to education and learning. So let's look at the form of the use of indigenous languages for education. What should be the starting point? Because I feel if I have a child or if I have my son needs to get to school, and the first point of conversation, the first language has to be English. As long as there's no official position making use of the indigenous language, that would be a challenge. So in order to incorporate the use of indigenous languages into education, like you make reference to, what should be the starting point?
I think the starting point is the home, to be honest. Statistics have shown that children who are bilingual assimilate faster and more than children who only speak one language. So that means that if your child speaks your local language and English, it stands a better chance of learning and assimilating more. So that in itself, I think, is a plus. On the flip side, can you use your local language outside of your home setting? If you live in a cosmopolitan area, Lagos is an anomaly, right, because it's that cosmopolitan. But if you go further interland, if you go to Osun State, most people there speak the Yoruba language. A child in that place will not face the kind of challenges that a child in Lagos will likely face because of the cosmopolitan nature of it. So the starting point for any child should be their mother tongue, to be honest, because it helps you to think better. And for people who, the English is a very funny language, right? And I say that with respect, some of the things that we as Africans speak, our use of language does not directly translate to the English language. And, the similarities between English and between Yoruba, for example, and say French is that the French have words that, even though it doesn't translate to Yoruba, you can use it similarly. The plural form of you, in English, you is you. In French, it's different. It's almost like there's a word to refer to older people and more people. It's the same for Yoruba. So we can find similarities here and there. But by and large, there's no, children, it's us that are older now, we have issues. I've been trying to learn French for the longest time. It's just not entering. But for young...
Why is it not entering? Is it the way it's been taught? Let's also look at the way language is taught.
Yes, again, to your point, and it's a running joke in schools. I don't know what it is now, but back in the 90s when I went to school, language teachers appeared to be a lot harsher than other teachers. I realized that could be because they had to maintain a certain number of students for their language to be retained as part of the subjects of that school. However, as an older person, you have a lot that you're thinking about. Your mind doesn't quickly pick up things as a child would. So those could be one of the reasons. But if you allow young people to absorb whatever language, I think is a plus.
So you were saying something related to some of the barriers to promoting indigenous languages. We're making references to education, the starting point. Maybe you can continue your conversation in that.
Also, yes, if you've been taught a certain language from infancy or early childhood, for instance, there's a tendency that it stays with you throughout your life. That's why people who grew up in certain communities and moved still kind of pick up few words, or they still retain few words from what they learned as a youngster. But when you are older, your brain processes it slower, which is strange because we're talking, offset about football players, for instance. By the time most of them get to Europe, where most of them play, they are probably in their late teens or early 20s. But you find them picking up languages wherever they go. So I think with a little dedication, anybody can pick up anything. But from a standpoint of education, where the challenge is trying to force things into people. Some people have a natural inclination for picking up languages. Some don't. I understand languages, I think, quickly, but I don't speak it as good as I would like to. So you find these pockets of things. But for when it comes to indigenous languages, I'm still of the I'm unyielding in my opinion that for some people, that is like the best way that they can learn. I grew up in Ibadan, and I know schools that used to teach math, for example, in Yoruba. That's when I know that math in Yoruba is the shiro. Take one, add two. For kids that are not from a certain background, that language that they speak, only thing that you need to do is to convert what you're trying to teach them into languages that they already speak. And then we have a winner, I think.
So language is also a tool for influence.
Yes.
Now you find that in some places there is the deliberate attempt to ensure that some languages are spoken or used for more communication while others are not. Now in that regard, what would you ask, or what would you subscribe, what would you want Africa to do? Now there was a time where in schools it was even almost like an offense for you to speak your native language. You want to communicate, for instance, you're seated with a classmate of yours that comes from the same area as yours, and you want to communicate, just says nobody speaks vernacular in this place. Now it also goes to some workplaces, maybe for the purpose of unity, it is forbidden to speak anything other than maybe a certain language. Now, what's your thoughts around that? And how can we coexist while respecting the right of people to speak their languages?
So it's the vestiges of colonialism, like I mentioned earlier. During the colonial times, we know that one of the things that they use to gain that power and influence is by outlawing things that were African in nature. So African religions were banned, African languages were banned, and introducing us to this Judeo-Christianity, Judeo-Abrahamic religions that have nothing in common, with the African culture, with the African way of doing things. So yes, we cannot divorce that from where we currently are or where we used to be for a very long time. So you find out that, yes, it's ought not to be an offense to speak your mother tongue. It should not be done anywhere. Yes, if you want to communicate officially, you have to use the official language. But if you're having informal conversations with people or just expressing yourself, it ought not to be a sin for you to express yourself in your mother tongue. It still goes on to a form of dressing. Who says that I have to wear a suit? By the way, I don't wear a suit, and that's no shade to you. On any day, I stopped wearing suits long time ago. I gave up shirts because, for one, it's hot in Africa. Why are we wearing suits and ties? Not you, Femi, but in general terms, those are one of the things that still remain from this colonial, times. And until we as Africans are able to stand up to what's rightfully ours and make those demands, nothing is going to happen. I was speaking with some professor of communications, and he said that one of the things that you know that languages, or if you are losing your command of language, is when you are unable to speak that language uninterruptedly for 10 minutes. And I thought to myself, I think I'm a decent speaker of Yoruba language. Can I hold a 10-minute Yoruba language conversation? It's difficult without putting when, it's tight. And then this is me. I speak the language fairly well. So until we are ready to see you know, these things that are ours as important, we are going to have to live with it. Unfortunately, these languages are getting extinct. You know, people have their accents and dialects, and I don't hear it anymore these days. I'm from Abeokuta, and the Abeokuta has a peculiar accent that they use. I don't hear it as frequently as when my grandmother was alive, for instance. I don't speak it. I don't think any of my cousins do. And by the time it gets to my kids' era, chances are that we've lost it.
But there's a shaming associated with certain accents, and it seems to be a status thing or a way of proving that you are quite modern when you
when you
certain
have accents. Granted. However, if there are custodians of culture who are successful, till the late Mko Abiola died, his Yoruba was Egba accented. Nobody laughed at him. President Obasanjo is still here. He speaks accented Yoruba. Nobody laughs at him, perhaps because they've had a certain level of success. So we need folks like that. We need culture custodians who had success to put their languages front and center. Nobody is going to laugh at, nobody laughs at Donald Trump, and he has a New York accent, right? Nobody laughs at Boris Johnson, and he has a Cockney accent. And people looked at him like, oh, the boy around the corner. You know, you have that accent. So until we're able to center things that are ours, we are going to keep running in circles and losing them.
Talking about losing them, you know, like you said, the use of indigenous language is rather faded. Look at the crop of Gen Zs that you have now. I did an experiment recently, and I observed most of them couldn't even speak the indigenous language.
Right.
You find that virtually everywhere. Now, what do we need to do as a nation, as a society, to preserve our indigenous languages?
We have to take culture as seriously as we take sports, for example. You know, the people like to reference our success in music, and the peculiar thing about Nigerian music is that it's a mixture of various languages and a dash of English. Nobody has a problem with that, and we spend a lot of time, you know, platforming that, you know, acknowledging that and rewarding that. We need to start doing the same with our languages. We need to pay the same type of attention that we give sports. We just finished AFCON now, and you saw how the entire globe, Africa, Nigeria, was centered around the sporting events. Until we are able to have festivals of arts and culture that can put our culture on the biggest platforms, we are going to have this conversation again next year, and we are going to lose the language. So, in my view, it's important for us not just to, yes, it's great to speak English, but knowing what we know now, you know, China has the largest population in the world. Yes, a healthy dose of Chinese people speak English, but the majority doesn't. They don't need to, because they built their society to operate independently of the Western world. Africa has, you know, a ways to go in that regard, but it can be done if we are keen on preserving this culture. It's a matter of making it an institutional thing. So if you have, yes, perhaps maybe not in schools. Yes, I have people learn languages in schools, but you cannot just have one language for everybody in school. You know, you'll be robbing other people of their own identities. But I think of FESTAC 77 and what it did for African arts and culture. Those are things that I feel like we should do again.
So talking about ways of preserving language, we also know that the media plays a key role. But until recently, when one of Nigerian movies didn't make the Oscars, or didn't pick the award for the Oscars, there was no real efforts to ensure that movies are done in indigenous language apart from the Yoruba and the Igbo fames. Now, to that, what do you say? We're beginning to have Korean movies, we're beginning to have Spanish movies or the Latin American kind of movies. And they are widely accepted across the globe. We also have local film producers in Africa. Now, how do we make it internationally acceptable that those languages also go out? Because people in the diaspora, that's one way to connect.
There's a saying in Yoruba that is how you carry your calabash, that the rest of the world will carry it with you. You know, we need to start building platforms and systems that are not shy to be ours, right? So I'm watching a series now that is about Nicolas Sarkozy's son. It's a French series completely done in French, 6 episodes. I don't mind, I'm watching it, right? Will I do that for a Yoruba series, for instance? Perhaps, but I've not seen it. You know, and you're right in that the media has a major role to play. One of the things that I feel that the late Chief Alejo Dokpesi did with his media outlets at the time was people went by their Nigerian names. Even he, whose first name was Raymond, started to use Alejo more, you know, to centralize the fact that this is an African, you know, media outlet. That, I think, is one way to go that can be replicated, you know, across board. Yes, we want to communicate to the rest of the world, but I think there's more need for us to communicate among each other first before we can sell anything to the world. So we need to build, I think I've said it once on this show, you know, that almost everything that we depend on for media is foreign owned. We need to develop local technologies. We need to develop local platforms. One of the things that have helped, you know, the West is the media. Now you find that Disney has its own streaming platform, right? Paramount has, HBO has, all of these people have. But the thing that they have in common is that they belong to a certain group of people across the world. We need to do the same in Africa, right? And I know that a number of radio stations have started. One of the things that I'm also very excited for that we're doing at Souq News is Souq Pidgin, where we can platform, you know, a language that is commonly spoken across Nigeria, across Africa, as a matter of fact. You know, we need to have media outlets that are keen on doing that and are not just talking about it, but they are putting their monies where their mouths are, and their investments, you know, where they can be impactful.
On the national level, what kind of advocacy orientation should be put in place to ensure that indigenous languages are being preserved? There's that general awareness, and people now understand that we're at a time where we need to preserve this more than ever.
So me personally, I get really quickly tired of national orientation programs because they've not shown, you know, the impetus that is required across anything. Yes, there's a need for a national, you know, messaging, but I think we as individuals can do a much better job than waiting for a national body, right? Again, I go back to the US. Everything that we've been sold about the US is courtesy of their media and Hollywood. I've not been to the US. I can tell you to a large extent the number of their 50 states, because that's what they've projected in the media. When the US were going to normalize certain things in society, it started from the media, so that by the time you've had that message drummed into you for 10 years, you get the gist of it. You know, those are the kind of things that I feel like we have to play. Yes, the National Orientation Agency, or whatever body, or whatever it's called, has a role to play in the messaging, but since the days of Better Life for Rural Women and SAP, we've not done a great job of having a national, you know, orientation messaging to our people. I think we cannot wait. I think individuals are better posed to do the things than waiting. Yeah, we'll do it in conjunction with the government, but we can't wait for the government to get it done.
All right, let's look at the economic side. The job opportunities for multilinguals.
Yeah.
How's that?
Oh, again, because we live in a tech-driven society now, the opportunities are just increasing. Every time that there's an employment, you know, at the London Police Department, for instance, or the NYPD, you find out that they are recruiting people that speak Yoruba language, for instance, or Igbo, or excuse me, or whatever it is. So across the world, as the need to do business with Africa and Nigeria and native speakers increase, there's need to communicate with those things. So yes, those opportunities are there. Imagine driving in your car and the Google voice sounding to you does not know how to pronounce whatever name it is, but there's a Nigerian variant that will tell you, Adeniro Ogunsanya, turn left. You know, you understand it better. There are opportunities in that regard. Telemedicine, all of these things. Yes, there's a lot of opportunities that are tech-driven. We just have to upskill so that we are primed and ready when those opportunities come.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.